This episode is brought to you by Homes for Our Troops, a nonprofit helping build and donate homes to injured post 9/11 veterans. Visit hfotusa.org for more information. And welcome to Military Matters Fast Take. I'm Rod Rodriguez.
Hey, I'm Jack Murphy.
And we are discussing last week's episode with Dr. Daniel Green. Jack, you had a chance to sit down with him, talk about his book, Front Toward Enemy. And, you know, what really kind of caught my attention about this book is, in your discussion with him, was the rising voice of this GWAT generation. Mm-hmm. You and I have talked about in the past, reading books that inspired us to join the military. I think everybody's read, especially guys like you, Special Forces guys, Ranger guys. You've all read Mac VSOG books. You've read those Green Beret, snake eaters in the Vietnam War. It inspired a lot of you guys to go that route. I remember reading Bravo 20, which is about a British special operations guy. But I remember thinking, like, this is inspired. Like, I read that before I joined the Army. And I was thinking, like, this is amazing. You know, him and Richard Marcinko and Red Cells. And I was like, this is so cool. But we're seeing these are guys from the Vietnam Desert Storm-ish kind of era, the 80s, 90s, and then prior to that, of course. This group of veterans, 2 million now. I had to look up the numbers here. 2 million global war on terror veterans, and there's only like 1.5 million active duty service members. So yeah, that's a stark number here. These veterans are getting out and they're making movies. They're making television shows, writing books. What are your thoughts on, and you are one of them? You're one of the guys that wrote a book. Yep. What are your thoughts on this growing number of veterans? Their movement into the arts?
Well, I mean, first off, I mean, the inspiration to join the military that you mentioned, I mean, I interview these guys literally every week, and it's fascinating to hear. I mean, sometimes they join the military, or, let's say our generation joined the military because their dad was in the military. Like, that's one thing for some families. But for most of them, yeah, they saw a movie. They saw a movie or they read a book or something that's very interesting to me. How many people were joined the military because they saw a film? The one that stands out in my mind, Full Metal Jacket, which is like this profoundly anti-war film, showing the Vietnam conflict in like terrible, terrible terms. Like, I don't think Stanley Kubrick ever in his wildest mind thought he was making a movie that would inspire young people to join the military. So I'm always so interested and surprised to see that somebody watched Full Metal Jacket and was like, oh, hell yeah, that's what I want to do. But yeah, you're right. So our generation is, they served for a period of time, or if they decide to stay in for a career, they are retired or they're retiring right about now. And yeah, they're embarking in all sorts of things. They're writing their own books. They're making their own movies. They're going into politics. They are doing all sorts of different things. Sometimes they're marching on the Capitol and breaking down the front door. But mostly they're doing good things.
Let's not go there, okay?
Mostly they're doing good things. They're doing good things in society, like 5% of the time.
Free the shaman.
But there were vets there. But for the most part, the guys and women are all doing good things out there. What is it like the broader question, I mean, maybe that you're alluding to, is like, what do I think about that, or what does it mean? And I think it like really has yet to be determined. Like, the social fallout from the wars in the bad ways, I think we're just starting to feel. But also the good things, like, how is this war, like, how does it fit into our culture? How do we place it? Like, how do we place it in our own personal histories? How do we place it in the history of the United States? Like, what do these wars mean? What do they signify? Like in the future, are we going to look back and say, oh, these wars, the GWAT was this inflection point where America went from this thing to this other thing, this other direction we went in, good or bad? I'm not making a values judgment on any of it because I don't have a crystal ball. But how are we going to see it? I think it's just too early to be able to tell. And it's really for our generation of veterans to, largely define that. And of course, I hope we make good decisions.
I had this thought today actually because I saw something come up on my feed about this veteran is the last of his unit or last of this particular thing, and it was 105 years old. And I thought to myself, what are we going to say when it's the last GWAT veteran? What will history say he fought in?
I honestly, and this is like very cynical and very pessimistic, but I honestly don't think it will be a blip on the radar. I think these will in historical retrospect, these will be seen as bushfire wars that were not particularly important to the United States one way or the other. They were fought by an all volunteer force. There was never a draft. There was no real substantial anti-war movement or effective anti-war movement in America throughout the 20 years of the conflict at all. It just didn't exist. And I think that they were also, at least Iraq was certainly a war of choice. And I see it. Look, or I will just go ahead and say it. I see it already when I go. I've been trying to be more social in life, and I go out to these galas and these charity dinners and these sorts of events, and everyone wants to talk about the horse soldiers. They all want to talk about this glorious moment, the first couple months in Afghanistan, where we went in there and our boys, rode in on horseback and kicked some ass. And I mean, it's absolutely right to admire them for that. But what strikes me when I sit in these events is the word Iraq is not mentioned once. Like we're even as veterans, we're already memory holing huge portions where it's basically the first 3 months of the war in Afghanistan are like the good war that we want to talk about, and everything else, the subsequent 19 years in Afghanistan, no one wants to talk about. So I think that, yeah, a lot of this war really is going to get flushed down the memory hole, because such a small percentage of Americans served, and the public, I mean, my impression, my personal impression is that the public is pretty oblivious, and always was. And I don't think they even have strong opinions about the war one way or the other.
I think it's interesting when you that idea that we're kind of putting things in this memory hole. One of the points that Dr. Green makes is that one of his inspirations for writing this book was that there were tons of books out there, but they were all about violence or what violence does to you. Written mostly by special forces guys, special operators, infantry guys, Marines, and guys that were out there in those combat jobs. But he's like, there's a lot more to this. Like the combat was a big piece, but so was stability operations. So was the what he called the hold. It's probably a Navy term, but Army, we just call it stability operations. Like we got to hold it and keep it alive and then build it. And that was done in large part by folks in support MOSs, enablers, if you will. To your point, horse soldiers, an amazing story, very heroic, and it conjures up these images of special forces guy riding in a battle on horses. Nobody wants to talk about the kid who got killed doing crater overwatch in 2005, and people are like, what was crater overwatch? Oh, that was when we were afraid that insurgents would use craters that they had made and hide bombs in them as IEDs. So we put young men and women to guard holes in the ground, and they died guarding holes in the ground. Nobody's talking about that,
right?
Because like, yikes. We did that. Oh yes. Also burn pits. Remember when you slept next to that burn pit where they were burning lithium batteries. Pepperidge Farms remembers. You know, these are stories that I think, and one last point that I'll make is there's a certain amount of, and I don't know if we're talking about this, war shame. Like, if you're an enabler, you're not allowed to talk about your experience because you weren't outside the wire doing stuff. You weren't infantry. You weren't engaging the enemy one-on-one or in a firefight. So a lot of folks feel like their experience, no matter what happened to them overseas, how long they were over there, how many deployments, they feel like their experience isn't worth telling.
Yeah, that's a real thing, man. And unfortunately, like I can tell you, like I even know like Rangers and Green Berets that feel like I didn't do enough. I didn't do as much as that other guy over there, and they carry around like a kind of shame that I it really bothers me. I think it's unfortunate because none of these people have any shame to bear. I mean, there's nothing shameful about their service. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, that does exist out there, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and it's something that I think we're going to see a lot of over the next couple of years. And I think this book hits on that. It hits on there are other stories, there are other experiences
Mm-hmm.
other than the combat experience. I had to have this discussion, and I'll share this quick story. When I came back from a deployment, 2009, we went as an intelligence battalion. And we come back. I remember being in this auditorium, and this psychologist comes out, and he's like, "Hey guys, welcome home, blah, blah, blah. If you need any help, what kind of unit is this? What do you guys do?" And somebody said, "We're intelligence." You don't need me. You won't need me. And I just remember thinking, really? Like, you just did us like that? Like, you don't need me. You weren't outside the wire. You weren't fighting anybody. My dude, you have no idea what we were doing. Like, we're an intelligence.
You guys are a bunch of pogues.
Yeah.
Mental health.
Yeah, exactly. Like fucking fobbits. You know, and I remember somebody stood up and they kind of challenged him on that. And he had to backpedal really quick and kind of like, well, you guys, I'm sure you guys did your own things. And if you need to talk to us, like, yeah, everyone's experience is going to be very different. And the thing is also for like those people who are supply dudes and everything, they don't train supply guys necessarily for what war is going to look like or sound like or feel like. There's a certain amount of like, you'll be fine. Your supply, you'll be in the rear. Whereas your infantry guys are getting trained for, the shock, the sounds, the movement, what it's going to be like as much as you can. So what is it called? Inoculation, the action inoculation or whatever you want to call it. So,
yeah, man, I just finished reading, the book Sacrifice by Michelle Black. And she's the widow of one of the SF guys that died in Niger. One of the guys, one of the guys that died out there was an NBC guy. And then the other one with David Johnson, he was a vehicle mechanic.
Yeah.
And like that guy was like in the man, like hosing down the enemy with machine gun and sniper fire, had to break contact. And I mean, it's heartbreaking. He was out there, he was by himself underneath a tree trying to take some cover, like literally fighting to the last bullet before he was killed. I mean, it's unreal.
Homes for Our Troops, HFOT, is a publicly funded nonprofit organization that builds and donates specially adapted custom homes nationwide for severely injured post 9/11 veterans to enable them to rebuild their lives. These homes restore some of the freedom and independence our veterans sacrifice while defending our country. Nearly 90 cents out of every dollar spent has gone directly to supporting our veterans and enabling them to rebuild their lives. Visit hfotusa.org. That's hfotusa.org to learn more. And again, those are experiences that, 2 million veterans they're carrying some variation of a war experience. Not to mention, we don't even have to talk about the other things like crime, rape, murder, all the other stuff that goes inside of your deployment. 2 million veterans trying to deal with society. And it's a war that many of us we don't even understand how it ended.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, sure, we put the shutters on Iraq and Afghanistan, but there's still Syria that mysteriously no one talks about that much. Like, hey, we still got Marines and airmen and service members in Syria fighting. But most Americans can't find Syria on a map.
Not sure why they're there.
Yeah, nobody knows why they're there. I'm sure. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know enough about Syria. Maybe that's an episode we need to do. Like, it's Syria. Why?
It's Iran. Just say Iran.
I don't think are we allowed to say Iran? I don't know. Oh my God, OPSEC, folks. Go read a book, folks. Go read a book. You'll know. But yeah, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. I think Dan said something great in that interview. He said, give me a couple of years. Let me reflect. I say, give me a couple of years to digest this, and then I'll reflect on my experiences or how he feels about Afghanistan. But dude, so many veterans, like nobody wants to talk about it. Like all these podcasts, a lot these active duty service members, they'll go on a podcast or these key leaders, and they're telling you, like, I don't want to talk about Afghanistan. We don't want to talk about it. And
how do you not talk about a 20-year war? I don't understand. Like,
especially during that first anniversary, shout out. I will give a shout out though, to the folks at SOCOM, the leadership during that time. I was there. I heard their interviews, and it was a super difficult time, right? It's like the first anniversary, and the leadership was open and honest. They straight up said, yeah, this bothers us. This hurts. But they focused on the troops. They focused on the service members. Be there for each other right now. This is the difficult time. Be there for each other. Not very many other leaders were even willing to go and say anything publicly. It was almost like, oh, what day? What? I don't know what you're talking about. Let's just another day in the world. Like, let's just get to tomorrow and hope this blows over. But I think
it's so traumatic that, yeah, that it does kind of have to be like, flushed down the memory hole, so to speak. I'm not saying that's right. And I mean, obviously there are guys out there struggling with it, understandably. And, sending it down the memory hole is not the answer, right? Like, you need to like process this and come to terms with it, however that takes place. But I think because it is so traumatic that's the impetus to kind of try to like sweep it under the rug, just pretend it's not there, but by not addressing it, not dealing with it, especially for veterans, it doesn't go away. It's not going to get better, by ignoring it.
Well, I'll tell you how you fix it, Jack. You fix it by changing history. All we need are some really kick-ass books, all right? We rewrite how it went down. Some video games. Isn't
Jake Gyllenhaal doing that in his film right now?
I don't know what that's about.
Making that movie about how he's going back for his interpreter while we have all these people over there that we just like literally just fucked and left them over there. But the Hollywood is like, oh yeah, we're heroes and we're doing. I don't know, man.
Exactly. Look, the next Modern Warfare is going to be your guys going in to kill all the Taliban. We're going to make the Taliban leader look like a Skeletor, and we'll go in there and kill him. And in video games, we'll come out on top every time. And eventually people will believe that we did, and it will be amazing. Like, there's parts of the Vietnam War is an example. Most people don't know what that was even about.
Yeah.
They know it happened, but
Dude,
Why did it
if you
happen?
talk to most people, they believe the myths that persist about it. Like they believe that the war was about like smuggling heroin back in the caskets of GIs. They think that, you know, we were sending just poor African Americans over there, using them as cannon fodder. Which, I mean, it's not the majority of the guys who were dying were like middle class white people. Um, Not that there's not, I'm not saying there's not racial disparities in any of this, but um like yeah, people really interpret conflicts through layers of myth. And sometimes that unfortunately it includes veterans too. I
Yeah.
mean, one guy
Go.
was telling
Yeah.
me, he's like, you know, a lot of my peers, their entire view of Vietnam is through the eyes of an 18-year-old and the 1 year that they spent there. And they didn't do any sort of like additional learning or have any curiosity about that country or that region. And they carried around things inside them for 50, 60 years that were not even necessarily true.
That's that's an interesting point. I know a couple of Vietnam veterans who served 2 years, 1 year, but it was a year of hell. Like
Yeah.
one guy, I talked with one guy, God bless his soul, Agent Orange victim, lost all the saliva, the saliva buds in his mouth. Like
Oh
he
my
can't
God.
produce his own saliva. He's got a feeding tube, and he was telling me a story about, you know, we just got off the plane. I was this young kid out of basic training and, you know, infantry school. And there I am. They picked me up at the airport at this, I'm driving in a Jeep, and the sergeant's like, "Hey, you're the new guy. You're driving. Just follow this road." And he's hitting all this bumpy stuff. And he's like, "What is this?" And he looks over, and it's, you know, body parts and animals and humans. And he's just like, "Holy smokes." And these guys who picked him up, this was every day for them. Like, don't be such a wuss. Don't cry. Don't be a little baby. And he's just like bottling this 18 years old driving over dead bodies. Welcome to
This
Vietnam.
was up on the DMZ.
He was an Americal division guy. I don't remember. I think it was artillery actually. Um, I don't know where he was. He tells the story. He told me the story, and I retold that story. I did a podcast recording with him, and at some point I'd love to release some of those interviews. But yeah, to your point, like you're looking at history through a very small period of time in your life, and when you were young and a kid.
Yeah.
I think GWAT's going to be a little different because, I mean, this is a war. I remember I saw this and I was like, guys, this is nothing. This isn't cute. Like, oh, look, he's serving with his dad.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, guys, this isn't cute. The fact that we've been at war long enough that you can serve alongside your children.
That we've gifted the war to our children.
I'm like, this
That's
isn't
failure.
cute. That's failure.
That's failure. Yeah.
It felt like failure. I was like, this is not good. And, I'm in that kind of boat where I'm still a service member in the reserve, but I've got 3 young men now that are in active duty. Had the war still been going on, that could still be a possibility. Like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, son, when you get to camp, Arif John, or when you get
Come
to
check in with your dad back at the HQ.
let me know if my thing is still there that I left on,
Your graffiti in the
my graffiti in the shit. Is that still there? Yeah, but it's horrible. Like, that's not the legacy we want to leave our kids. And I wonder if that's going to be the one thing that we got out of it. Like, in future wars, are we going to look at this and go, okay, is this winnable? Or are we going to sit here for another 20, 30 years?
I think
I don't
our
know.
kids will make the same mistakes that we made. I mean, if you look at the people who ran the GWAT, I mean, some of these guys, I think McMaster's is one example. I mean, they wrote their thesis papers about the Vietnam War. Then they turned around and they pretty much made a lot of the same
Sure.
mistakes. So I mean, it's this sort of like historic, time being a flat circle. I mean, insert whatever cliche you want, but I don't think I also don't think it's just a question of like our leadership being evil or being bad people or something like that. I think that they're constrained and they have a series of maybe they have 1, 2 options to pick from and how they prosecute the war, and they go with whatever they think is the least bad one. And things don't end up quite the way that any of us want to. And, you know, given the political constraints that are placed upon them, you know, they have to act within that narrow band of behavior that has been defined for them. So it also goes into the White House and the executive branch. And, you know, somebody should have jumped on the hand grenade a lot earlier and just ended the war. I mean, who in the hell thought we were going to be in Afghanistan for 20 years? I mean, just pull the plug, man. Like, when you can see the end game, when you're at year one and you can see the end game and realize, okay, we don't have the patience to stay here for 50 years like we would need to. So I'm not going to stay here for 20 or 25 to not complete the goal. So I can see that. And I know that our country doesn't have the patience to stay there that long. Dude, just pull the plug, man. Just tear the Band-Aid off. Like,
nobody wanted to be that guy.
Yeah, no one wanted to be that president, right? No one wanted to be that president or that general that's like, oh no, actually, we're not turning a corner. We're just grinding our gears out here.
Yep. Well, on that sour, depressing note, folks, if you are interested, go check out our sponsors. I feel so bad for our sponsors right now because they're like, oh, geez, that's so sad and dark. But God, dog, folks, this is a fast take. Make sure you check out Stars and Stripes, stripes.com. Use promo code podcast and get 50% off your digital subscription to Stars and Stripes. It's an awesome publication, folks. You're missing out if you're not in it. As always, you can go check out Jack everywhere on the Twitters, on the Google machines, on the Google tubes. It's Jack Murphy, RGR. The man is consistent. I am on Twitter, RodPodRod. And that does it for us. That is it. We'll see you next week on the next episode. This episode was brought to you by Homes for Our Troops, a nonprofit helping build and donate homes to injured post 9/11 veterans. Visit hfotusa.org for more information.